Peace and blessings, family. You're tuned in, actually, I should say, to the Sajdah Saturday morning coffee talks. I'm over here chilling, listening to my little jazz music this morning. Look, we're going to be continuing our Women of the Bible series today. And today we're going to be talking about the wives of Moses. So tune on in. I hope you all are active in the chat. Get your coffee, get your tea, and we'll see you on the other side of prayer and these commercials.
O Allah, guide me among those whom thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what thou hast judged. Surely thou judgest, and none can judge against thee. And he whom thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art thou, O Lord, and exalted be thee above what they set up besides thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides thee. And I bear witness that Muhammad is thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings. You're tuned in to the Sajdah Saturday morning coffee talks, where we talk about life, love, and business. Peace and blessings, family, and welcome to the Sajdah Saturday morning coffee talks, where we talk about life, love, and business. How y'all doing this morning? I don't know what y'all sipping on. I have something from K's. You can see that up close. That's our product endorsement this morning. Rooibos Masala Chai. Beautiful, beautiful chai that she makes with rooibos, because I make my chai with rooibos and just a splash of black tea. Most people make their chai with all black tea, but mine is pretty much decaf. And if I want a little kick, I'll put like 1 teaspoon of the black tea in with the rest of my herbs. So that's what we're doing this morning. This is the Sajdah Saturday morning coffee talk. So wanted to endorse our sister's products and tell you all to go out there. She's a friend of the show. You can go to Kay's Coffee and get these wonderful teas and coffees. She actually does have a really good tea and coffee program. And if you can see, if you're really interested, she's got a QR code, but you can use the website there, Kay's Coffee, CAIYS Coffee. All right, family. So today we're continuing our series on the women of the Bible. And I want today to be Make Someone Feel Good Saturday. I said in the promo that I wrote this morning that a lot of times we're in need, or we're hurting, or we're uncomfortable, or a little disappointed or sad about something. That's just life, right? Life happens. But you have to know how to count your blessings so that you can get into that mathematical thinking mode. And one of the tricks that is a good way to change your vibration is to give. So today we're going to make this Make Somebody Else Feel Good Saturday. And I want you to think about this. Think about the energy you're giving to somebody. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed something or wanted something and you hadn't really asked for it, or maybe you asked for it and it just seemed like nobody heard you and somebody came through for you? Something simple as you saying, man, I'm kind of sitting here and I want to talk to somebody, and somebody called you, and it was a good conversation. You know that feeling? Or let's say you were busy at work and you're like, man, I ain't had time to go and even grab my coffee today. And somebody that you trust and love brings you a coffee. Just that feeling. When somebody just gives you a random gift, or somebody says to you, hey, what's your Cash App? And just gives you a couple dollars. It's just the act of giving and making somebody feel good and doing something for you that you need. If you know somebody, let's say you know somebody is struggling with their bills, and you think about it like, you know what? I can probably get their gas. Let me pay for their gas. Let me pay for that trip they want to go on. Let me put something towards their gas bill. But let's make today, make somebody feel good. Buy them some food, do something for them. Maybe they just needed a hug. Will you be the one to give them that hug? So that's what we're going to do today, in honor of Zipporah. Okay. You all know we're doing this series on the women of the Bible. And this is where we talk about life, love, and business. And this is a continuation of the series on connecting women of the Bible to consciousness and entrepreneurship. So many times women are written completely out of history, and seldom are we lifted up and celebrated for the work that we do. We've contributed to the building of nations, kingdoms, businesses, and more. And oftentimes when you see old school pictures, people can identify the men in the pictures, but the women kind of fade into the background, into obscurity, and very few people know their names. So as we connect these women of the Bible to our journey as conscious entrepreneurs, I want us to think about remembering those whose history is being erased or liquidated, or somebody whose history is being altered to support a narrative of somebody else. This is the way a lot of these biblical figures have been done. There's somebody, somewhere who has an agenda. So they don't tell us where they came from. They don't tell us what they looked like. We don't get into the spirit of the person because they have a way in which they want to package them. And I say this message, y'all know I'm a broken record on this. This is why it's so important that we own and monetize and preserve our history and not allow people to water it down. And what they do is they water it down just enough, they weaken it just enough so that they can shape and mold it. It's just like when the colonizers go in and take over a country, they weaken the economy just enough to make that country dependent. Well, what they do with the history is they weaken it and water it down just enough so that you don't get enough information to get inspired and it can be used to support something else. So, all right, I see y'all in the chat. Sister Sandra, Brother Lamont, welcome this morning. Yes. All right. Okay, so we're talking about Zipporah. What I want you all to do is when we finish this show or this conversation, go and read Exodus, mainly chapter 2 and chapter 4. Read those two. You can just read the whole thing if you want. And I want you should really have an idea of, and the ability after we have this conversation to be able to pick up on Zipporah, the wife of Moses. So as you're going through Exodus, you may even be able to pick up on Moses a little bit more just by having a more relaxed and everyday conversation about the sister. All right, so let's dig into this. Zipporah was the wife of Moses. As Moses was fleeing Egypt at around the age of 40. So pay attention because these ages are important as well. Okay. So when he was fleeing Egypt at around the age of 40, he met Zipporah, along with her 6 sisters in the land of Midian. Midian. Somebody type Midian in the chat, and somebody type the age of 40 in the chat. The women were trying to water their father's flocks, but a group of shepherds drove them away. But Moses stood up and saved them and watered the flocks. That's Exodus 2 and 17, where you can find that. The women returned home sooner than usual. When their father Jethro asked them why they were home so early, the sisters told him about Moses. So he called Moses to him. And when Moses got over there and they started talking, Moses admitted to Jethro that he was fleeing from Pharaoh. And Jethro, who was an advisor to Pharaoh at the time, threw him into a pit and left him there to die of starvation. I see some accounts where they describe the situation as Moses had a warrant for his arrest. So here Jethro is. He's a Midian priest. And his daughters have met up with this man who had a warrant for his arrest. Now, they did a good deed for them, but he still had a warrant. And he admitted it to Jethro. After he fled Egypt, he had killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave. Some of you are saying, where in the world is Midian? I like to, when I'm reading, I like to look to see where are these cities. Well, Midian is located in modern day Saudi Arabia. Now, before you go visualizing what she may have looked like based upon the way people look in Saudi Arabia today, let me stop you. Because the Western press has depicted the women of Saudi Arabia in a way that signifies a weak and victimized woman. And we have no evidence to believe that this was the condition of Zipporah. She clearly had influence within her community, and certainly she had influence with her father, who was a priest and a very influential man. He was a very special man of spiritual significance. He was critical to bringing Moses out after he had been in exile for 40 years. We'll talk about that a little later. They actually met after he got out of jail. They actually met in the wilderness at the mountain of God. Go to Exodus 18 and 5 to learn a little bit more about that. So Zipporah, she saw Moses. I don't know if he was fine to her. I don't know if it was something about his energy, but she had compassion for him. And she brought him bread and water while he was imprisoned. After 10 years, she did this for 10 years. She brought him bread and water in the prison to make sure that he was still alive. That's a long time. And that type of consistency to me signifies a deeper, more spiritual love, not a surface love. And after doing this for 10 years, she turned to her father and said, "This Hebrew who has been jailed in the pit for the past 10 years, nobody has come around asking for him." Basically, she was saying, he's not dangerous to us. If it is good in your eyes, Father, let us send for him and see if he is alive or dead. Jethro didn't know that his daughter had been kind to Moses, so he was a little shocked. He said, "Is it possible, girl, for a man to be locked up for 10 years and survive without food?" See, because when they threw him in the pit, the plan was for him to starve to death. And Jethro's daughter Zipporah replied, "Father, haven't you heard that the God of the Hebrews is great and awesome and does miracles for them all the time? He saved Abraham from the fire." Y'all remember that story. "Isaac from the sword, and Jacob from the angel who fought him. And how about this very Moses who was saved from the Nile and from the sword of Pharaoh? I'm sure that God could have saved him now as well." And she said that to her father, knowing that she was a contributing factor to the fact that he was alive. She didn't say, "I kept him alive." She didn't say, "Look at what I have done." She didn't say nothing about herself. She said, "God saved him from Pharaoh. God will deliver them." That's a special kind of sister, because she didn't take no credit. She gave it all to God, who obviously was her motivation. So they went to the pit, and guess what? Moses was alive. He was alive, standing there and praying to the God of his fathers. They took him out the pit, cleaned him up, gave him a haircut, and brought him to the family table for a meal. And when he was at the table, he asked Moses for Zipporah's hand in marriage. She had kept him alive and shown him great kindness, but I don't see Moses as a shallow type of man who said, "Let me marry her just because she kept me alive." I see Moses going a little bit deeper. Moses is one of my favorite characters in the Bible and in the Holy Quran. I see Moses going a little deeper and saying, "Look at this woman of God, answering the call of God." Because I'm sure God had to be talking to Zipporah over the years. And it's almost like she waited for him. And she answered that call to save him. This is a tough subject for me because I love Moses so much that it's hard for me to not lose Zipporah in the story of Moses. Although, based on the character that she shows, she probably wouldn't mind. But that's not the goal here. We want to lift her. Anyway, so after Moses was informed by God that he would be the redeemer of the Jewish people, Moses, together with his wife and children, so him and Zipporah got married. They had 2 children. They end up leaving. They were in Midian for around 40 years. And they left the comfort of Midian to travel down to Egypt, where the Jews were being abused. And this was a risky journey, and Zipporah joined him. One night, while they were staying in an inn, so they went down to Midian, checked into a hotel, y'all. I'm going to put this in modern terms. This is not scriptural. I am ad-libbing, to say the least. So they checked into a hotel, Moses, his wife Zipporah, and the 2 sons. And when they checked into the inn, an angel of God came to kill Moses. Zipporah realized that her husband was being punished for not circumcising their newborn son. Moses had delayed it due to the rigors of travel. Now he was on the way in an inn that the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. So Zipporah took out a sharp stone and did it herself. And she circumcised her son. And in doing this, remember, he had been threatened. His life had been threatened. This makes the second time that we know of, according to written history, that she saved her husband's life. The first time in that prison pit, and the second time when he was being disobedient and didn't circumcise the son. Let me know in the chat if y'all all right. So anyway, needless to say, our sister Zipporah was a servant of God. This sister likely had soldiered with her husband. She fell in love with him when he was in a prison. And then she rode with him for 40 years on his journey. She married him after he had been in jail, locked up for 10 years. During that time, she had kept him alive, despite the intention of her father to starve him to death. So she had to go against the will of her father and submit to the will of Allah and save this man that was in this prison pit. Did God speak to Zipporah and tell her to love and support Moses while he was in jail? What made her do it? Why didn't she marry someone else and forget all about this 40-year-old dude that's down there in the pit? See, she had to have a divine calling as well. She was obedient to God. These are unusual circumstances, yet she continued to soldier on with him. And during those next 30 or 40 or so years, Zipporah and their two sons accompanied Moses on his return trip to Egypt when he was about 80 years old at this time. Okay? Auntie said she was a rider. That's right. So did Sandra. Both of y'all said he's a rider. Yeah, she was a rider. Now that's a ride or die. All right, now then check this out. So then by this time he's turned 80 and they go back to Egypt. And as they approached Egypt, Moses, Zipporah, and the two children, Moses was greeted by his older brother, Aaron, who reprimanded him for bringing his family along to Egypt. Aaron said, "We are pained by those already here, and you bring more people to this terrible situation?" That's Exodus 4:20. So Moses took his wife. Let me go back to that. This says to me that Zipporah was a soldier because they're going into a bad situation, into a war zone. They're going to set some people free. They're going to fight. It's not safe. So much so that Aaron's like, "Man, what you doing? You brought your family?" But like you said, Zipporah was a rider. So once Aaron reprimanded him, Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. So basically, he went and put them on a donkey and sent them back to her father's house or to the city where her father lived. I find it interesting because we'll see later in the story that there were other women there, but Aaron probably said, no, you got to protect this one. You got to protect this rider and your children. You can't bring them into the war zone. So he made them send them back. So after he put them on the ass, he returned to the land of Egypt. And there he took the rod of God in his hand. So basically, he sent them back home on a donkey, not a horse or a camel, but a loud A donkey. That tells you that sister was a rider. Okay. Some of y'all like, what? No. Okay. So a donkey and an ass are used interchangeably. And I think the Latin, I wrote this down, the Latin word for donkey is equus africanus asinus. That's the scientific name for donkey, although it's often referred to just an ass. So more common in the 20th century when they kept interpreting the Bible. Some of the newer versions will refer to it as a donkey. Now, Zipporah and their two sons, Gershom and Eliezer, they traveled back to her father's home in Midian. Guess what? She would not see her husband and the new nation for more than a year until after the Exodus and the splitting of the sea. That's according to some opinions that I read. So imagine you roll out with your husband. Y'all ride out. His brother comes and says, man, what you doing? They can't be here. You got to send them out. He put you on a donkey, you and the children on a donkey. I don't know if y'all was on the same donkey or it was 3 donkeys. And then you go back to your father's house and you wait an entire year to see your husband again. Well, we already know she had the patience because she had served him in that prison pit for 10 years. So likely a year was nothing for her. She knew how to spiritually fulfill herself. She clearly wasn't relying on Moses in that way. They clearly didn't have that kind of relationship. The next time we hear about Zipporah is when the book tells us that Jethro, who was her father, came to join the people of Israel. He came to them in the new land with Moses' daughter, grandsons, and sons. By this time, the sons done had sons and children of their own. The last time they saw their husband and father, he was an unknown private man. Now he was the leader of the people. That's powerful. All right, now, here's something else that Zipporah may have had to reconcile with. Okay, fasten your seatbelts. In the book of Numbers, we read this. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses regarding the Cushite woman he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. Now, many say that this Cushite woman was his first wife. Some call her his second wife, but I've learned that her name was Tharbis. So here's Zipporah is. She's a rider. We don't know quite. I couldn't tell accurately when he married Tharbis. But let me tell you something about the Cushites. This is what makes all of this so powerful. The Cushites, as you all know, are from the land of Cush. You can read about them in Habakkuk 3 and 7. The word Cush itself means black. And historically, the people of Cush have been dark-skinned. And I encourage you to go look up the Cushite people. I'm going to show you a little video on the Cushite people or the Cushite Empire, which was an ancient kingdom in Nubia centered along the Nile Valley in what is now northern Sudan and southern Egypt. So let's take a look. I'm going to show a video. I want you all to check out a short video about the Cushite people, who are the people that Tharbis came from. And Tharbis was Moses's other wife. I can't say whether she was first or second. I can't call her second wife. We know how much of a rider Zipporah was, and we know how powerful she was spiritually. Check out Tharbis. Let me grab this. I'm going to take myself off.
Or continue your journey along the Nile and experience a day in the life of an ancient Egyptian doctor with the thing.
Here we go.
Along the Nile River, in what is now northern Sudan, lay the ancient civilization of Cush. Though they were once conquered by a powerful neighbor, The kings and queens of Kush would go on to successfully challenge two of the most dominant empires in history. From 1500 to 1100 BCE, Egypt controlled Kush, introducing many Egyptian cultural and religious practices. The civilization of Kush was more than 1,000 years old at that time. Its early capital city at Kerma had impressive temples, palaces, and houses, including a massive mud brick temple structure that had a chapel deep inside, reached by a long staircase at the center. Rich gold mines helped the Kushites build a flourishing commercial network, making bronze weapons and tools, and trading materials like incense, animal skins, ivory, and ebony wood from sub-Saharan Africa. The tide started to change for Kush as Egypt descended into civil war. By 750 BCE, Egypt was divided into local kingdoms with fluctuating alliances. The Kushite king Pianki saw an opportunity. He led his navy, flanked by horsemen and archers, up the Nile to the gateway city of Hemenu. As Pianki's army constructed siege ramps and battle towers, the city's ruler sent his wives and daughters to negotiate, not with Pianki, but with the women of his royal household, later known as Kandake, who were extremely influential in military affairs and political succession. At the end of a long siege, Pianki entered the conquered city and bitterly criticized the conditions in its stables. From there, Pianki and the Kushite forces conquered the Egyptian capital of Memphis. Pianki installed his sister, Amunirdis, as priestess of the great god Amun in the Egyptian city of Thebes, and left other Kushite officials there before returning to live in Kush. His successors extended control all the way to the Nile Delta. This was a high point for the empire of Kush. Trade thrived and they built magnificent temples, palaces, and pyramid tombs all along the Nile. But the Assyrian army was approaching Egypt in its annual campaigns. When the Assyrians began to encroach on trade routes near Jerusalem, the Kushite king Taharko moved to stop them. The Assyrians defeated him with the help of some rebelling Egyptian princes and drove him out of Egypt in the 7th century BCE. The Kushites continued to rule in their homeland for nearly 1,000 years that were prosperous and innovative. They moved their capital farther south to the city of Meroe, where they built temples to a new god called Apedemak. They built new cities in the savanna south of the Sahara Desert, some of which contained huge reservoirs for water. When the Roman Empire conquered Egypt in 31 BCE, Kushite armies again traveled north, led by Queen Amanirenas. She led them to success in battle against the Romans, capturing the bronze head of a statue of the Roman Emperor Augustus and bringing it back to Kush. They buried it under the doorway of a temple in the capital, so that worshippers would step on it as they crossed the threshold. After brokering peace with the Romans, Kush continued to prosper. Over time, however, groups of people called the Noba raided from the west, and trade routes were disrupted by the rising kingdom of Aksum. Around 350 CE, the Aksumite king sacked Meroe, effectively bringing Kushite rule to an end. Since then, some have argued that Kush's history has been overlooked by generations of European and American scholars, who promoted the idea that Egypt was part of the origin of Western civilization, while Kush, as an African culture, was excluded. Today, there's still much to learn about Kush, including a writing system we haven't deciphered fully.
But how exactly?
There's so much I can say about this. First thing, y'all remember we talked about the Candaces or the Kandaki, the women. I don't know if you caught that in this video. You all have to go back and listen to this again. But the Candaces are brought up in connection to the Cushite people that Tharbus, who is Moses' other wife, is related to. And then it bears witness to how people change up the narrative and water down the history so that they can say, oh, they can own it, right? Once they water it down, then they can own it. And you heard her say at the end of the video how the Cushite kingdom and the Cushite history was kind of pushed aside because of the narrative that Egypt helped to establish Western civilization. So very, very interesting and very powerful, right? I hope y'all doing all right. I see you, Auntie. I see you, Marvelous Marva, Sister Sandra, Sister Khadija, Brother Victor. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Brother Lamont. Thank you all. Welcome. I see y'all. Okay, let's keep going. Okay. Are y'all enjoying this? Let me know. Give me a little thumbs up or something if y'all enjoying this, because I feel these characters coming alive for me in a new kind of way, just by taking the time to think through them. And if you all are liking it and y'all want to continue this series on the women of the Bible, I'm happy to do so. Let me know in the chat. All right, so we're going to keep going. Now, remember in the book of Numbers, we read that Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses regarding the Cushite woman he had married, because he married the Cushite woman. And they couldn't have been talking about Zipporah, because remember, Zipporah was a Midianite. And remember, that's in modern day Saudi Arabia. The Cush is modern day Sudan, roughly for both. So now hold on. Who is Miriam? Why is she all up in the business? And why she get to stick around and Zipporah had to get sent home? Well, Miriam was the daughter of Amram and Jochebed. She was the sister of Aaron and Moses. Y'all see that dynamic? You got this powerful sister Zipporah, loving and submitting to her husband, saving his life. You got her sister over there. I don't know whose side the sister was on. But yeah, she was their sister. You all remember Moses in his infancy, where there was an unnamed sister who saw him going down the Nile in the basket. That's in Exodus chapter 2. She was later identified as Miriam. All right, so that's who she is. What were they saying about her, though? Were they talking about Zipporah, or were they talking about the Cushite woman? Were they talking about Moses? What were they talking about? Some say that they were actually not talking about the woman. Some people say they were. Some people say they had a problem with her because she was a Black woman, a Cushite. Others say that they weren't even talking about her. I would like to argue that probably by today's standards, they were all Black, or Black adjacent. But rather, so they were actually, though, many say, talking about Moses, and not necessarily about Tharbus. They said, has the Lord spoken to only Moses? Check out the drama. Now here the Lord is dealing with Moses, talking to him, making him leave his family. He's been with his family all these years. He obviously loves his family. He's a man of God. He's a caring man. He's a protector. So here Moses is going through all this stuff. Everything God is telling him to do, he's doing it. And then here the people are talking about, has the Lord spoken only to Moses? Hasn't he spoken to us too? So why did he separate from his spouse, whereas we haven't? See, God was dealing with Moses directly in many ways, and it was confusing people that he was chosen. You can probably only imagine the dynamics in that little group of people. And there's places in the Holy Quran and in the Bible, like I said, I don't want to go into this and let this story kind of cloud Zipporah. But there's so much in the history. I just encourage you to go and study it. Oh, also, here's another book that you should get. How many people have this book written by Brother Saad Alim Muhammad? It's called Moses, A Sign of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. There's some great history in this book, and he does a great job at making Moses come to life. So this is another thing for you to get, for you to study. You should get this one anyway. And if you see mine, I got so many notes I've written all in it. I've actually read it twice, but good book. All right, let's continue with the story. What were they talking about? Well, they said that Moses had divorced or left his wife. How did Miriam know that Moses had separated from his wife? Well, they say that Miriam was beside Zipporah or Tharbus, whichever one they were talking about, probably Tharbus, when Moses was told that Eldad and Medad, who were newly appointed prophets, were prophesying in the camp. When Zipporah heard this, they say, I don't know if this was Zipporah or Tharbus. I'm thinking this was Tharbus because they made the comment about the Cush woman who was Tharbus. A lot of people have changed up the history and the narrative to make it fit themselves. But anyway, one of Moses' wives said, "Woe to their wives if they are required to prophesy, for they will separate from their wives just as my husband separated from me." Miriam had heard this and she told Aaron. In truth, however, it was only Moses who was required to separate from his wives in order to be constantly on call, ready to speak to God and respond to God at any moment. Many of the other prophets remained married and led normal-ish lives. And the information is confusing when you look at all these accounts and the people changing the narrative as to whether or not they're talking about Moses' separation from Tharbus or his separation from Zipporah. It's also not clear which one was the first or second wife. Actually, he was 40 years old when he was put in prison. So was he married then to Tharbus, or was he married to somebody else? Did he marry Tharbus after Zipporah? I think they make these things confusing on purpose because the confusion supports a specific narrative or version of their history. This is why it's important that we document and own and control our history. Y'all know I'm gonna beat that horse, okay? No, I would never beat a horse. I'm gonna beat that word over and over again, right? I'm gonna repeat it over and over again because we have to own and monetize our history. This is why you all see me pushing. Listen, y'all, support the completion of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad House Museum so that the history is not watered down and controlled by somebody else. I drive past Malcolm X College all the time and I see the name up there, but it just seems like there's no personality attached to who Malcolm X is. I've been offered the opportunity to let them water down the Honorable Elijah Muhammad or repackage him. Why do they want to do that? And then they come in the way of trying to seem like they want to cooperate so that they can control. And I just had to say, it's a non-negotiable. It pains me to not be done and to not have enough donations to complete it after I put up my own money. But I just said, but I'm going to go through that pain. I'm going to have faith in God's timing. Why? Because this right here, what we're talking about, all this unclear repackaging and the way in which these people are being presented, it's like you don't even know them anymore. Yet, and I'm not even saying anything bad about this person, but these businesses that JP Morgan and the Rockefellers and the Hiltons and the Goodyears and the Hershey's, businesses that they built in the early 1800s. People like JP Morgan, you still got Chase Bank as the number one banking institution. You still got Morgan Stanley that he and his ancestors founded. See, this is again part of the science of business. And we're going to cover that on this show. I'm working on something for that. The science of business is applying supreme wisdom to your business and to your history. Let me give you a quick example before we move on. We talk a lot about generational wealth, and we say, okay, let me leave some money for my children. Let me get an insurance policy so my child will have $1 million when I die, or let me do something with investments so that when my child starts off their life, they don't have to start off like I did, without really having no help. That's wisdom. But when we start approaching supreme wisdom, we talk about building an institution that is going to last generations and preserving a history so that people 200 years from now will be saying your name. Just like 200 years off, we still talking about JP Morgan Chase through his businesses. I'm not going to get on that soapbox because y'all know I can go on that one. But anyway, when we're talking about Moses separating from his wives, it really doesn't matter who he was talking to, they were talking about, because either way, Moses clearly had to separate from both of them. And in the end, Zipporah was a soldier. She clearly had to have a deep understanding of what they were dealing with. She's not some weak little wife who is described as making the ultimate sacrifice. I looked at so many videos and read so much stuff in preparing for this today. And it's a sacrifice, but it's clear that she was a highly, highly spiritual person. Probably had the ability of prophecy herself, her and Tharbus. She was divinely connected to and in tune with her husband. She knew that her husband had to be in constant communication with God. Why? Because God was probably talking to her. Were they tuning in to one another while he was in prison? What fueled her love for him for those 10 years? Her story is often written as if she didn't know what was going on, like she was kind of this bimbo. I saw one YouTube video in particular where she was constantly crying and begging. It just seemed so unreal. God had already conditioned her to love him and not physically be with him. He was in prison for 10 years. She wasn't sleeping up under him for 10 years. So why is she crying because he's about to go to Egypt? It's just the way they depicted it. God could very well have strongly inspired and even spoke to her. I keep saying that. I doubt if she was walking around in a light blue peasant dress with a petticoat, crying and begging Moses to stay home and not go see what God wanted. She saw him in prison and was driven to keep him alive for 10 years. She negotiated with her father to let him out of prison, convincing him by talking about the redemptive qualities of God that Moses served. She never even mentioned to her father that it was her, the food and the rations that she was sending down into the pit that was keeping him alive. She talked about God. And when Moses asked for her hand in marriage, she soldiered with him and bore him 2 sons. The scripture is very light on this historical account of Moses' domestic life. I don't know how or if Tharbus and Zipporah interacted, but to me, it is clear that they were both very powerful women who understood the mission and were divinely intertwined with their beloved Moses. Let me see what y'all talking about in the chat. Yes, Sandra, divine, recognize divine. Yes. Brother Abel said inspirational talk, very inspiring, powerful. Thank you, sir. Oh, thank you, Auntie. Auntie gave us $10 super sticker. Sister Aletha with the bullseyes and the hearts. Welcome, Brother Victor Lamont. I see y'all with the thumbs up. Yeah, very interesting connection. Gilbert, thank you, sir. Thank you. Khadija, all of you all in here. Thank you. So anyway, I hope that from this talk, you feel Zipporah a little bit. You probably feel Tharbus a little bit. You might feel Moses a little bit better. Go pick up this book I was telling y'all about. Get your Bible, get your Holy Quran, and let these talks inspire you to dive into the history of these people a little bit more. And as we're talking about being those that do for self and understanding that our ability to sustain ourselves is not separate from our spirituality. And we can learn so much from these characters who were able to fulfill the word of God and still do for self. That's powerful, right? All right, y'all. Let me put my little banner back up here. I took it down so y'all could see the video. I already did my spiel about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad House and why this is so very, very important. There's two ways you can donate. You can Cash App, $Mo Today. That's MOETODAY. You see that on the screen here. Three ways, actually. Or you can use your credit card and go to SajdahHouseDonations.com. Or you can get one of these commemorative Elijah coins, which is going to be a membership coin. We are very close. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan told me to get it done this year. So I need y'all's help. I'm in deep. So join me on the journey. Look, I think this is the 58th month that I've been working on this. And Surah 58 in the Holy Quran is the pleading woman. Now, the pleading woman is a bad surah. They all are. But that one right there, I'm going to let y'all read that on your own. But in my own lay person's way, I'm letting y'all know I'm pleading with y'all to join me on this journey. But the pleading woman wins in the end. So, all right. Thank you, Allah. Thank you, family. Love you all very much. Remember, today is Make Somebody Feel Good Day. Drop them a couple dollars, buy them a dinner, do something for them, cut their grass, pick up some groceries, do something for somebody today, something tangible, and show somebody that you love them today. Make somebody feel good today. So thank you, Brother Lamont. Brother Lamont said he got my back. I thank y'all. I appreciate you all. Do something. Let's do something nice and loving for somebody today. All right, family. Happy Saturday. I'm going to get out of here. Make sure you stay tuned. I've been doing these reruns during the week, and it looks like you all like them because there's been lots of views on the rerun. So we'll continue to rerun. I think what we'll do is we'll rerun some of the coffee talks in the morning during coffee talk times so that you all can kind of check them out and refresh in the morning as well. Thank you, Brother Victor. Brother Victor said, great presentation. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you again, Auntie. All right. So peace and blessings. I'm going to get out of here and happy Saturday. Greetings, conscious entrepreneurs. Add the Mind of an Entrepreneur show to your Roku TV lineup and catch up on past episodes of all your favorite Mo Today shows.